The Humiliated Father II, Part 3 of 4. And, in effect, it's since their first meeting that Sichel has made this dimension arise in Lumiere's imagination, i.e., that the old man that is driven by this desire through which, for this character of a trampled-over father that Claudel presents to us, this father has been played, if I can put it that way. This played father that is the fundamental theme of classical comedy, but here we have to understand the meaning of played in a way that goes even further than baiting and derision. He is, if I can put it this way, played dice with, because he is in play, in the end, a passive element. As is explicitly evoked in the text, with reference to the responses that end the dialogue between the two women, after opening up to each other and right up to their deepest thoughts, one says to the other, "Go on, each of us must play her game now as sudden death." It is precisely at this moment that Toussaint Tureleur makes his entrance. What are you talking about? We are talking about yesterday evening's game of whist, of this hand when we were discussing strength and weakness. And on this question old Tureleur, who by the way knows very well what it's about, responds with this very French elegance to which he is always making allusion. He's a true Frenchman, Sichel has said to Lumiere. Oh, he is incapable of denying anything to a woman. He's an authentic Frenchman, apart from money. Money, ugh. He responds by making a few pleasantries about what was left for him in his hand, i.e. the honours, of course. This image of a four-way hand, in another sense, as in whist, the one which I have alluded to on several occasions myself, in order to designate the structure of the analytic position, is it not striking to see it arise? The father, before the scene actually happens, is already dead or nearly. A puff of wind could knock him down, and this is in fact what we are going to see in the aftermath of a dialogue in which the co-dimensions of tragedy and buffoonery would make it worth our while to read it together. For, in truth, it is a scene that deserves to be acknowledged as being unique enough in its genre throughout the be-all and end-all of literature, and also the margins that deserve commentary, if we were just doing literary analysis here. Unfortunately, I have to go through it a bit more quickly in order to give you a taste of all these detours. In any event, it is well worth going over one of these detours. The son beseeches the father to give him the infamous 20,000 francs, of which he knows, and for good reason, as the whole business has been weaved together for him for a long time via Sichel as intermediary, that he has them to hand, that they are bulging out of his pockets, to let him have them, to yield them to him, in sum to allow him not only to fulfill his obligations, not only to repay a sacred debt, not only to not lose what he, the son, possesses, but not to see himself reduced to being nothing but a serf in the very land to which he has devoted all of his passion. For this land near Algiers that it concerns, it is here that Louis de Coutfontaine has searched for the repudiation, in the sense of something that has brought out and rejects, in the sense of an offspring, the repudiation of his being, the repudiation of his solitude, of this dereliction in which he has always sensed himself to be. He, who knows that his mother never wanted him, that his father had only ever, as he says, observed him growing up with disquietude, it is with passion for a land, it is with a return towards something from which he senses himself to have been exiled, a return to nature. This is what it's about. And in truth, there is a theme here that is well worth referencing with the very genesis, historically speaking, of what is called colonialism. It springs from an emigration not only towards colonized countries, but also towards virgin territories. This wellspring generated by all the lost children of Christian culture is very much something that it would be worth us singling out as an ethical impetus that it would be wrong to neglect at a time when we are reaping the consequences. Hence, It is at the moment when this Louis is seen, at the point when there is this showdown between his father and him, to be reduced to desperation, that he brings out the pistols. The pistols that he has been armed with, and armed with by Lumière. There are two of these pistols. I beg you to pause a moment at this level of sophistication. It is, properly speaking, the dramaturgical artifice, the trick, the element of sophistication. What he has been armed with is two pistols. Two pistols, I will tell you straight away, that are not going to go off, even though they are loaded. It's the opposite of what happens in a famous passage from Sapeur Camembert. Private Pidoux is given a letter from the general. Look, he says, this letter is not loaded. It's not that the general doesn't have the means, but it is not loaded. Ah well, that is not going to stop it going off all the same. Here it is the opposite. Despite both being loaded with care by Lumière, the pistols do not go off. And that doesn't stop the father from dying. He dies of fright, the poor man, and this is exactly what has been expected all along, since it is explicitly with this aim that Lumière had handed over to the hero, Louis de Coutfontaine, one of the pistols, the small one, saying to him, "This one here is loaded with a blank. It will just make a noise, and it is possible that this will be enough for the one facing you to croak. If it isn't enough, then you use the big one, this one here, which, in this case, has a bullet." Louis has learnt his lessons on the ground, in a land that can be cleared, but also one that cannot be acquired. It is very clearly indicated in the text. Without some brutal evictions, and definitely with the second shot, there is no doubt that the hand of the one pulling the trigger shakes more than with the first shot. As Louis de Coutfontaine says later, he doesn't like to procrastinate. It's not with joy in his heart that he takes things to this extreme. But as this is where we are, he says, the two pistols will be shot at the same time. However, as I am telling you, loaded or not, one like the other, neither goes off. There is only the noise, but this noise is sufficient, as is brilliantly described in the stage directions in the text. The old man stops bolt still with bulging eyes, jaw swallowed. It's beautiful. We said something about the grimace of life last time. Here the grimace of death is not elegant, and, bless me, the thing is done. I told you, and you can see it, that the level of sophistication here is, in relation to the imaginary dimension of the father, very strongly articulated. In this sense that the imaginary can suffer even in the order of efficaciousness. It is demonstrated to us by the image. But, so that things are even more beautifully put, Lumière is the one who enters at this very moment. Of course, the boy is not completely calm. He has not the slightest doubt that he is definitely a parricidal murderer, because he began by perfectly well wanting to kill his father and, in the end, he did it. The terms and style of the concluding comments that are exchanged at this level are worth taking pause to consider. I beg you to look them up. They are not lacking in a brutal harshness, very tasteful. I have noticed that to certain ears, and not the least, and ones not without merit, hard bread, like The Hostage, can seem rather wearisome plays. I have to admit I do not at all find these detours wearisome. It is quite dark. What perplexes us is that this darkness plays along with, at the same time, a kind of comicalness, which it has to be said seems to have a rather too acidic quality. But these are merits nonetheless. All the same, the question is, where do we expect it to take us? What is in it that makes us passionate about it? I am very sure that in the end, this kind of demolition of a father caricature, massacred in the buffoon genre, is not in the nature of something that incites feelings in us that are easily locatable. All the same, what is beautifully done is the way this scene ends, i.e. that Louis de Coufontaine says stop once the act has been crossed off, whilst the girl takes the wallet from the father's pocket. Just a minute, one detail, let me check something. He tips open the little pistol, he tinkers around inside it with these things that were used at that time to load these weapons, and he sees that the little pistol was loaded as well, which he points out to the impassioned person who had armed him in the first place. She looks at him and responds with a kindly laugh. Isn't this also something that raises several problems for us? What does the poet mean? We will find out for definite in Act 3, when Lumiere's true nature will be revealed to us, which we have only seen so far in traits that are neither dark nor fanatical. We will get to see what the nature of this Lumiere's desire is. The fact that this desire can, for her, who considers herself to be driven by destiny, mean making, and in a definite way, the ultimate sacrifice, right up to the hanging by which she will definitely meet her end, and by which she does in fact die, which is indicated to us in what follows in the story. This desire does not preclude that her passion for her lover, the one who is truly for her lover, Louis de Coufontaine, extends to wanting a tragic ending for him, being taken to the scaffold, for example. This theme of love tied to death and, correctly speaking, of the lover's sacrifice is something that, with the two stories about La Mole on the horizon, the one about the La Mole who was beheaded, of whom a woman is supposed to have gathered up his head, and the one by Julien Sorel in which Miss La Mole, a fictional creation, is equally going to link up with the corpse, is literally there to highlight this theme. The extreme nature of Lumiere's desire is very much what we need to keep in mind here. It is in the path of this desire, of this love that aims for nothing other than to be consumed in an extreme moment, it is towards this horizon that Lumiere beckons Louis de Coufontaine. And Louis de Coufontaine, parricidal murderer, insofar as he has been granted, via the murder of his father, his inheritance, and in another dimension from the one he has just experienced up until then, is going to become from then on another Tirailleur, another sinister character in relation to whom Claudel will no more spare us in what follows, the caricaturization. And take good note that he becomes an ambassador. You would be wrong to think that all these reflective glints of himself are lavished by Claudel without one being able to say that deep down he is himself implicated in I don't know what ambivalence. Hence, Louis refuses to follow Lumiere, and it's because he refuses to follow Lumiere that he marries his father's mistress, Sichel. I'll give you the end of the play, i.e. the way in which this kind of revival, transmutation operates, so that he not only puts on the dead man's boots, but he also gets into the same bed as him. It revolves around a sinister story of debts being acknowledged, of the total manipulation of all the insurance that the father, always cunning, had made or taken measures towards before his death, in order that those who were bound to him, and namely that if it was Lumiere, would not have too much interest in his demise. He had arranged things in such a way that his wealth would seem to be owed, to be registered in the book of debts of his murky associate Ali Habenichts. It is to the extent that Sichel returns this IOU to him that she acquires for him this title, which is really abnegating. He abnegates his title, as Paul Valery says, in that he marries her, and it is on this point that the play ends, the engagement between Louis de Coufontaine and Sichel Habenichts, the daughter of his father's usurer companion.